Hello and welcome to LudoNarraCon Day 2. We are once again Kaizen. I am Ollie and this is
Phil.
We're the founders of Kaizen and we're going to talk some more about Paradise Killer, our hot, cool first-person open-world murder mystery detective game. We've had another video running on stream this weekend about kind of what it's been like since shipping Paradise Killer last year. But in this video we're going to talk about some of our influences whilst making it, and we've kind of got a scattershot of influences to talk through and to show off. So we haven't got any real structure to this. We're just going to take a wander around the island and see what we can see and talk about why we did some of the things that we did. And we'll start with your boy Shinji. Shinji came about because almost all the other characters you speak to in the game are suspects in the crime that you're investigating. But we knew we wanted someone that wasn't involved in the crime, or isn't a suspect in the crime, because not everyone was involved, or were they, to have some kind of comic relief around the island and have someone that can provide just a break from thinking about the mystery and the crime, because everyone has got a secret to hide on the island except Shinji, who you wish would perhaps hide more than he does. And we wanted a kind of like mascot character for the game, kind of like your Monokuma or something from Danganronpa. But at the time when we designed Shinji, we were not doing so hot in the securing a publishing partner field, and so when it came time to design him, I was very angry about a lot of things in life and the game, and decided to kind of go the obnoxious route with him. So rather than perhaps something that might actually get an Nendoroid made once in some point in the future, I decided to go a little bit more offensive with him. Which is exciting, because then that meant that Steam said we weren't allowed to put him on the store page. So making a mascot character that can't be used to promote the game is not the greatest idea we've ever had.
Yeah, but on the same time, there's games that we both like Shadows of the Damned, where your mascot character is really kind of offensive and really crass, and I think there's a bit of influence from that, having this I'm not going to say anti-hero, that's not really what Shinji is at all, but it's just having, I don't know, a personality that is very strong in the game as your mascot is something we both like.
Yeah, like that Shadows of the Damned, Johnson from that was a big influence when thinking about him, because he does a great job of explaining the world of Shadows of the Damned to you, but also delivers some humour. So, speaking of influences, a lot of the island architecture is this area is the Syndicate area, like the seat of power of the island, where the government resides and works, and a lot of that was based on Brutalism, which has become a bit more in vogue in games recently, but big towering blocks of concrete that I really like the look of cement and concrete architecturally. Not everyone does, but we wanted to use it here as a kind of, like, you can see the pyramid at the back there out in the distance, and kind of Brutalism feels in a lot of ways, to me at least, it carries some of the same symbolic nature of the culture at the time, and it's a kind of like modern interpretation of kind of big monolithic structures from old civilizations and kind of otherworldly fiction. One of my big influences, which I hate to say it, is Lovecraft's Mythos, because when I was younger reading Lovecraft, I didn't realise that he was a scorching racist and a despicable human being, but a lot of his fiction around elder gods and monolithic, impossible structures from other planets, I think plays in a lot to some of the stuff we did in the game. And
what do you want?
His influence can be felt in a lot of games and a lot of media. It's just unfortunate that he's such an awful person.
I mean, the big brutalism, it's quite important for us to separate out areas of the island as well. So, each one had to have a distinct feel, and having these kind of brutalist structures in the seat of power felt right. Like, it represents, brutalism is kind of big, strong, solid. So it made sense to do it. But a lot of people also think it can't be beautiful. And, some concrete structures look good, some look bad, but there can still be a beauty in these kind of very rigid, strong forms that kind of are represented in this. And I suppose, the pyramid's a good example as well. Like, they are beautiful. They're very simple, strong thing, but they are very beautiful. And they can take on a character because of their materials. So hopefully that is represented a bit in this area.
Yeah, I like what they call big mundane architecture, where you get these huge structures, but they're often quite featureless. And I just think there's something... I find bleakness and emptiness like creepy and scary. That's why I like a lot of early polygonal games, and even before polygonal games, stuff like Doom, where there's just emptiness.
That's weird.
And because every game nowadays is, because we can render it, we fill it with stuff. But I like big, featureless expanses of things, and that was one of those games. Actually, was a big influence for Paris Killer. Was a PS1 open world game called Germ's Newareta Machi, which is an open world, fully 3D open world game on the PS1. Way before GTA, and it's big and it's featureless because of the hardware that it's running on, but it's got this atmosphere. It's just it's just amazing and scary and creepy.
Yeah, sometimes that emptiness just lets you imagine the rest of it, right? And there's that building, I think it's in New York, and I think people call it like the Men in Black building or something. It's this big tower that's got no windows or anything in it. I think it's actually for like phone equipment or something. But there's something fascinating about, there's just this big structure. What is inside it?
Yeah.
And it could be nothing. And nothing is kind of creepier and more intriguing than something.
Yes.
So it's kind of playing on that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. You can see like people exploring it more with stuff like Control. Like, what a phenomenal game, and like visually and exploration of like brutalist structures.
Yeah, that is a really good example, actually.
And then I think one of our biggest influences stylistically was city pop album covers and Vaporwave, and we didn't set out to make like a Vaporwave game or anything, but the influence of Vaporwave art and the meaning behind the art kept creeping into the game, because we tend to share quite similar thoughts as a lot of Vaporwave artists, I guess, with we came from a background of, when we were younger, we're both in a punk band together and part of the UK DIY punk scene, where no one was going to give you anything, so you made it yourself. You made your own zines, you printed your own album covers, you put on your own shows, and the modern equivalent to me of that is Vaporwave, and Vaporwave has a lot of anti-capitalist sentiment and kind of acts as a big critique of the late stage of capitalism that we find ourselves suffering through at the moment, and is failing all of us. And that's kind of like, we had those sentiments when we were writing the people in these buildings, the syndicate, these high and mighty people that used the rest of the population of the island as cattle. And then I think we hadn't just planned to make a Vaporwave aesthetic game, and then that kind of like one thing led to another. Like, we had these anti-establishment ideas and themes that we wanted to communicate, And then as we started doing the UI, we leaned into City Pop, and then once you start looking at City Pop, you kind of lean into Vaporwave often as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was, for a long time, our UI was very bland. There was a lot of just grey box, right? Grey box, white text. And partly that's because it was early on in the game, we just need to get something working. But some of it was also just a lack of inspiration for it. And a few months in, I remember you said that you've been thinking, and what you really want to do is lean into the idea of these City Pop album covers. And you collected a few as a mood board and sent them over. And to me, like, starting to put that in, it did start to make sense. And I think if you'd suggested it without seeing it or trying it, it doesn't work. Like, why on earth are you putting City Pop in a murder mystery game? It doesn't work. But then it does. It's got that perfect kind of brightness to offset the darkness of the island. It's got that relaxed feeling that obviously goes with the music, that kind of encourages the exploration. But it also served that purpose of just like doing things we couldn't do with other resources. You know, we don't have a big team to make loads of animation or, you know, really fancy effects or anything like that. But with these City Pop, these kind of simple City Pop and Vaporwave pieces of art, you can get a lot of expression out of kind of very simple pieces. Like this music scene that you got there. There's not a lot going on, but there's expression, and it's kind of feels a bit unique to Paradise Killer. And yeah, it meant that for like basically a two-person team, we could do an awful lot with very little. So yeah, it felt right very quickly.
Yeah, and like, a lot of the UI and 2D art is taken from stock photos, and I've seen some criticism of that I don't agree with, but like, again, that's harking back to our DIY aesthetic, like trying to do things ourselves and like try to do what we can with what little we've got. But it also plays into Vaporwave and City Pop, because most City Pop album covers are photographs, and what am I doing? And then obviously Vaporwave is a kind of punky DIY combination of a lot of different influences and aesthetics formed into one very striking aesthetic. It uses a lot of like found art and a lot of like corporate jingles, and you know, one of my favourite Vaporwave albums starts with a PS1 boot up sound, and obviously we can't do that because we'd be sued, but so long as we use the right ones, then we can still maintain that aesthetic and achieve a lot with a little.
And there is a very kind of strong point in it as well, like whether or not you like the stock photos, it does a lot. Like the fact they are there means it has something to say. If we just had plain backgrounds, or we had something that was kind of drawn in the same art style as the rest of the game, it would be less of a contrast. And one of the big criticisms I have of UI in games is that they do tend to go for very simple now. Nicely done. You know, like so much UI is very, very simple, very elegant, very clean. And I don't always think that's right. Like UI should be part of the game, and you can make it part of the game. You can use it to add character. It doesn't just need to sit there as silently as possible.
Yeah, I hate modern game UI. Like, don't be afraid of putting UI on screen. Just go bonkers with it.
I mean, it's not all true. Like, you know, look at Persona 5 is an example most people would agree. Like the UI in that is pretty striking, and that's fantastic. But an awful lot of games, it is small white text on a slightly dark background. And, you know, credit to everyone who designed it. Like, they designed it to be very usable and very understandable. But I always think, like, if you had complete creative freedom, what could you make?
Yeah, I saw people when, like, one of my favourite games is Vanquish, and when that came out, people were like freaking out that the UI takes up so much of the screen. Put more on. Fit.
The UI in that takes up a lot, but it adds so much to the chaos of the game. And that game is, it's just fast and chaotic. Yeah. Wonderful.
So let's go and speak to someone so we can talk about character. Let's go and speak to Crimson.
Did the idea of her being in a sewer ever come from another game. Was that the reason you wanted to put her down there?
The reason Crimson lives in the sewer is the initial reason was for spacing, to space out the characters around the island. But then it made sense to put her there. Because I knew we needed a character. Because the problem we have with the game is that so many of the characters are members of the Syndicate, which means they are clustered around the Syndicate buildings in the northwest of the map. So we needed to spread them out, and so I put her just in this area, just for spacing. But this area had already been blocked in, and like the only place we could put her was down in this sewer. But that kind of made sense because she has a secret. This is her secret lair away from the rest of the Syndicate, because she's the island's idol to try and like a Japanese like pop idol or like a town mascot or something, to try and encourage the citizens to pray harder and worship harder. But she hates it. And so she got this secret room down in the sewers to get away from the rest of the Syndicate. So it started, like, the two things started to come together, like her personality of having this little secrets emporium, and us needing to put her in a different part of the island for pacing. Kind of came together.
Yeah, I always wondered if it was in the sewer because. Like so many games like Resident Evil have a sewer level. I wondered if you wanted to sort of particularly pay homage to that, and just never thought to ask before now.
No, I don't like sewer levels.
No, I hate them.
Yeah.
They are the most creepy part, and I don't get scared easily, but certainly there's a sort of tension that creeps in when I find out I'm going into the sewer in a Resident game. I also find that they're a bit too kind of constrained, like follow the path, off you go. Not always like that, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of the sewer levels.
Yeah, I prefer exterior environments in games, which is one of the reasons why there's so few interior environments in this game. Like, interior environments are, in terms of production for us, very costly, because if you're modelling someone's house, that's a load of bespoke asset that is not elsewhere. But whereas exterior, you get a lot more traversal opportunities, and I prefer big views and vistas, so that's why this sewer level is kind of very small. It's just a very small part of the map, and we don't do a lot of interior stuff just because I don't like it.
Yeah. Cool. So, were you going to talk about Crimson? And
yes. So I wanted to talk about the inspiration for the character designs and where they came from, and people have asked why they're 2D characters just in the world, in 3D world, and that is the influence there was Danganronpa, but also managing. We knew we didn't want to do 3D characters in this game because we didn't have the skill set on the team, and they're very expensive and hard to do. So we wanted to
also partly expression, right? Like, you can get a lot of expression out of a 2D character.
Yes.
And you can do that with 3D as well, but it comes with questions about what does the idle animation look like when you've got this very big over the top pose. So yeah, a few reasons why.
Yeah, and one of the big influences that people is not very subtle is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And for anyone that doesn't know what JoJo is, it's a manga and anime about the Joestar family and their adventures in a strange world full of strange foes that must be fought. And Araki, the artist and writer of JoJo's, is big on high fashion clothing and poses. And so that's what we wanted to do, where we knew we wanted our characters to be very striking. Everything we did in this game has to be eye-catching and striking, because it's a small game, it's a weird game, it's a small team, we're unknown, so we needed to make everything striking. So that's why you get these characters. And also, the other influence is not caring, is not being bound by someone at a AAA studio on a higher pay scale than you, telling you that what you're doing is weird and you shouldn't be doing it. We need to do something more conventional. So
no one telling us what our demographic was, and what people will resonate with.
Yeah, and modern, console games are extremely expensive to make, so everything is very conservative, and we didn't want to do anything conservative, and so that's why we wanted to go big and bold with these characters, to give them dramatic fashion style poses, and to give their clothes, to give them clothing and outfits that were kind of high fashion. Not every character is high fashion, like Lydia. It's a bit more kind of closer to home with her kind of punky aesthetic. But someone like Crimson, very high fashion, but then married with this goat head, where the inspiration from that was actually some stuff from like Silent Hill, where a big part of some of the Silent Hill games is psychosexual horror with the nurses and Pyramid Head. And this isn't a horror game, we didn't want to make horror characters, but we wanted to do something weirder with Crimson, where she is not your typical, fashion model, visual novel, hottie. She has other things going on, and there is a reason for all of these things and why she dresses the way she does. But allow us, I'm not into high fashion. I find some of it pretty grotesque, but I think it creates a cool aesthetic and a cool vibe. And so doing something that made me uncomfortable visually, created these really bold characters, and we had to find the right artist to partner with for that, and Giga did a fantastic job bringing these characters to life. Like they really got what we were going for. And Crimson's one of my favourite characters because of how her style meshed. Like the two, like all the disparate parts of what we were trying to do with the characters came together quite well for Crimson.
Yeah, I think she's just a really good representation of what Paradise Killer is as well. Like it's, this high fashion character with these big poses, but also has a goat head, and that's just what the island is. And no one really, like, you do question it, but you just get on with it. Like, oh, what's with the goat head? Cool, let's move on. And that's not like a defining feature. It's just that is what characters are like on the island. You will meet Sam, who is just a red skeleton. That's fine. And it, you meet Shinji, who is a demon, and that's fine. And it's just, it represents that our characters are kind of between normal and extreme, and there's not a huge differentiation between them.
That's weird.
Yeah, and I think one of our big influences was representation of people and our worldview of acceptance and diversity, and that's why like no one comments on stuff. Like these people, some of these people may or may not be absolute monsters, but they are also very accepting of who everyone else is, and there is a respect there for other people. And if someone is going to be a monster, let's make them be a monster for doing something, horrific, rather than. I don't know. Actually, that's not entirely true, because Yuri is a monster, and mostly because he's a smug POS.
It's just insufferable. But I mean, it's that feeling of, on this island, be who you want to be.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some people did choose to be a monster and murder a council. But generally speaking, no one is judging you for living your life the way you want to, within the confines of it. Like, obviously, there's this whole problem with citizens being repressed and everything. But it's there's no there's no prejudice in a lot of areas. So I think in some ways the Syndicate is more evolved than our societies today.
Yeah, I think a good thing to live by is create the world you want to live in, and video games have the power to do good. So if we can create a game world which in some ways reflects the world that we would like to live in, perhaps with fewer capricious, blood-crazed gods and knife-wielding maniacs, then maybe we could do something good.
And also, it turns out it's not super hard to be diverse and accepting. You just are, right? And you just put that in your game. Like, you don't have to question what's right or wrong with it. It's just, is this the way the world should be? Yes.
Yes.
And it go.
And then this screen I really like because I kind of this was so early. This screen, we knew we wanted this screen in really early, and I forget kind of where the inspiration came from it. But again, it was like we know we need to be in Lydia's car, but we can't. We're not going to model the interior of a car and have a 3D character in the car, so we need this screen. And I think probably part of the inspiration came from games. Like a lot of what we do in this game is try to surprise people, put stuff in that they're not expecting. So like a double jump in a first-person narrative game, or I was about to give a spoiler then, which I won't. Just try and do things that people don't expect. And I always love games where they surprise you with extra art or different types of scenes.
Yes.
I'm completely blanking on everything that like a good reference point for games, but that kind of game. But like
yeah,
or like
it's that. Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say I played through No More Heroes recently, and the end of that. Towards the end of that game, there is a vehicle section that you were totally not expecting, and it's a really cool change of pace and change of gameplay mechanic. And yeah, a lot of those bosses are actually really good changes in gameplay mechanics. And we don't have combat in this game, so it's really hard for us to change stuff up like that. So anything that we can do, like a different type of scene, like when you do investigate the interior of a building, often it's done through like a 2D interface where you are highlighting things that you want to investigate, and I think that creates quite a cool moment of surprise where it's not something you're necessarily expecting. And I just really appreciate that in games like a lot of when people were still figuring out what games are, like PS1 era stuff, PS2 era stuff, there was just loads of surprises. Like anything could be in this game, and it's up to you to go and find out what is in the game. And I find it quite rare, in at least in big budget games now, to find that kind of thing. That's why I like Final Fantasy 15 so much. Like that game had such a weird development. Like anything could be in that game, and turns out anything is in that game. It's really cool. And surprising, and that's kind of what we were headed for with this.
Yeah, I mean, I always really appreciate it, especially like the No More Heroes example. You get towards the end of the game, you're thinking, well, I've seen everything that this game offers. Oh no, I haven't.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, the developer was just desperate to give you more. Like, they want you to keep enjoying this game, and it feels like there's a sort of kind of respect that comes with that. And you know, in every game, not in every game, sorry. When this does happen in games, it doesn't always pay off. Sometimes it feels wrong or it feels weird, but it's always kind of appreciated as something else. Especially as a developer, you know how long it takes to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Very easy to not do it.
Yeah.
But when we were doing Paradise Killer, it was always like, can we find a little moment to do something special? And it doesn't have to be a lot. Like one of the last things we put in, which right before we shipped really, were the little hearts that appear when you go up and down in the lift, to show kind of the lift windows. And that's not much, but it was previously just basically a black screen. And then those little bits of movement, it's just kind of tries to give you a little bit more of the game wherever you can. And it's something like No More Heroes, obviously they take that to more of an extreme where they put in whole new mechanics. But yeah, it's just really nice to basically have the developer understand what you enjoy about the game, and the game is surprises and games that keep giving me something new, something fresh.
Yeah. And then we are in the apartment area now, And one of the big things, driving forces behind making this game was everyone on the team loves going to Japan and exploring Japanese towns, and we wanted to make a game that takes you away to another place and allows you to go and explore, because the real world is awful, and whilst we must not hide away from that, we also do need breaks from it. So we wanted to make this otherworldly place that you could go on holiday to, and we like going on holiday to Japan. So a lot of this area of the game is apartment blocks, like towering apartment blocks, again monolithic style apartment blocks that kind of elicit some of that feeling of exploring, just going for a walk, stepping out of your hotel and just going.
Really dense areas of life, just so much packed into a small square footage.
Yeah. And Japan's really hot, so this island is really hot. So.
Yeah. There's we talked about things people might not expect, and one of the things in this game is the sort of semi-platforming mechanics. So to get certain things, you have to figure out where to jump from and to in order to get a thing, right? I don't know if you're near an example at the minute, but there's like being able to put that in is really nice and freeing as well, because again we didn't want to stick ourselves to the whole like walking simulator style game, which this game could have been. We wanted to free it up a bit more and take influence from games that do let you explore and have the freedom, and rewarding the player for doing so is really important. To if you make this jump, you'll get something really cool.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps not really cool. Maybe you'll just get another blood crystal. But still, you get
something.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like, we made a narrative game because, or narrative exploration game because, most of the games you and I play tend to be quite combat oriented, or like survival horror-y, or Devil May Cry and Bayonetta and stuff like that. And there was no way we were going to do that because we've got a very small team without the skill set. So those influences of those types of games where you have movement and traversal mechanics to master, which I'm doing a very poor job of showing, kind of played into it. So I've currently got the air dash unlocked, and I'm going to go grab the double jump.
You just mentioned Bayonetta there, and
I'm glad to be back.
The intro to this game is one of my favourite parts of it, because you start off with this kind of text explanation, and then you jump into a scene in a bar, like a 2D scene in a bar, and you're thinking, okay, cool, this is what the game is. And then you drop into this 3D visual novel, where you're immediately presented with some dialogue, and then you realise you can walk around, and you start exploring this game very quickly. And then you get a puzzle element, and very soon you get to jump down from your starting point, which you can see on your screen there, just idle lands at the top of that big pole. You very quickly get to jump down from that, and that kind of starts to explain what the freedom of the game is as well. Like, you can jump, you can go, you can do anything. But that jump originally came about from a desire to want to replicate that first level of the first game of Bayonetta. Well, I say first level, it's actually the prologue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where you're running down the crumbling clock tower.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying it's as cool as that, because that's a fantastic opening. But this idea that, some games have got very slow build-up. We wanted something more dramatic. So having this big fall early on, with the music that kicks in, and then a big landing and saying Paradise Killer, it just felt felt right for the game, and so that is where Bayonetta came into it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to try and take those influences from different genres and try to put them into, not like to make a mashup, but to see how those influences can change the expected design of a different genre. We did talk about pulling in like some combat elements. For a while we had an idea about a weird kind of
shooting mechanic around the ghosts, but ultimately that felt like it was just putting it in for the sake of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't really adding to the game, so you can't always do it. I mean, we did try quite a few things. I certainly talked about a lot of things. So there's a definite kind of what will work and what won't work about the game.
But that's a very direct thing. Like, we like shooting games, so we're going to put some shooting in. But what I really like is just like that, the fall down from the Idlelands at the beginning of like, we really like that opening level of Bayonetta. How do we possibly make something that's even like 1% as cool as that in a non-combat game? And like that kind of thing is really interesting to try and abstract out that influence into something that is totally different, but still take the design principles and game experience principles behind it.
It also serves as a really nice way of explaining the island to you straight away, because you get to look down over the place where you're going to be spending the next potentially 15-20 hours, right?
Yeah.
You see the world, you can start to imagine where it is you're walking around, even though you don't know it. And that's one of the problems with this game, like you don't know much about it when you're dropped into it, and it's a weird world. But you are shown early on, this is everything, or well, you know, most of it, and this is where you'll be going around, and it's it's useful to set that up for the player.
Yeah.
Right, are there any more influences you want to talk about? Because we should be wrapping this up, really.
I really like the moons in Suda's games, so that's why we have a gigantic moon in this game.
Oh wait, is Suda an influence?
I have been known to enjoy the games of Grasshopper Manufacture and like stuff like the Silver Case and Flower, Sun and Rain was huge influences on this. Like, when I was thinking about like the kind of things we should make in terms of like player experience, I always thought like open world Silver Case, open world Flower, Sun and Rain, and that starts you off on a certain path, and then I feel that we had to become quite different from that. Like, that isn't, in the wake of Dark Souls, you saw a lot of games just making Dark Souls, whereas I'd never wanted us to do anything like that. It was always like, well, here's something that I would like to play, an open world Silver Case, open world Flower, Sun and Rain. Like, what is our take on that? And in the end, this game becomes wildly different because those are linear games, and the player kind of just goes, and you have to engage with them an awful lot because the story is incredibly complex. But the nature of the investigation in those games is a lot different from ours, and I'm really happy with that we didn't just make some kind of clone game or something, that we just made.
I mean, it's really easy to do that. Like when you're looking at how hard it is to actually make games, and certainly to make a game that can support you or indeed a whole studio. Very easy to say, I love this game, there's a market for it, I'm going to start taking influence from it. And if you're not careful, you take more and more influence from it, and then you do, perhaps inadvertently, make a clone. So it's really difficult, but really important to make sure that you are constantly aware of that danger, and make sure you are trying to do something original. You've got something to say of your own, but there's nothing wrong with taking influence from other places. Like, everything is influenced by something else, and perhaps looking for something below the surface. Like, one of the things you're really good at is obviously a very good designer and understanding how what makes a game enjoyable or good, or what lets a game down. Something you're very good at analysing and being able to pull out sort of the underlying stuff rather than the surface stuff. Has had a big influence on what we did and didn't take from Paradise Killer, or Paradise Killer, sorry.
Yeah, it's definitely like I feel like Paradise Killer is definitely a sum of a lot of parts from within us. Like, a lot of things that we like got spat out into Paradise Killer, and it's not often you get a chance to do that with a game, because often it's user tested, focus tested, committee designed into blandness. But that's what I think is so cool about the current indie scene at the moment, is just a wild variety of influences on show, and people just doing all sorts of amazing stuff, pushing the boundaries of what games are. You know, we like very gamey games in terms of what we make, but people are interpreting what it means to be a video game in lots of different ways, and you're seeing all sorts of very non-standard influences. You know, like most video games of a certain time period were influenced by either Lord of the Rings or Aliens, and now that feels like a minority case now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's going full circle, isn't it? Because before people knew what games were, they were making whatever came into their head, and they couldn't copy because there was nothing to copy from. And it feels like we're back there now, where people are aware of kind of what makes a game entertaining and how to use their life influencers and game influencers, but not directly. And yeah, you know, a lot of indie gamers can afford to do that, and by afford I mean, you know, they can take the risk to make the game that makes them stand out. That's what you kind of have to do as an indie game.
Yeah.
AAA, I think, is perhaps a little bit behind because they are still very much about how on earth can we recoup millions of dollar budgets, so they have to make something that will sell well. But I think we'll start seeing it come in more and more with you know, new IPs and interesting takes on what can be done with those IPs, rather than just constantly pushing for like visual fidelity. It's about what new gameplay mechanic can we have, and you do see glimpses of it in so many games. But they're off, like, new mechanics is often a small part of AAA rather than. Whereas in indie games, new mechanics are sometimes all they've got.
On that bombshell, let's call this one here.
Yes, it's been a little longer than we expected, but thank you for sticking with us. So LudoNarraCon is going on all weekend, and as part of it you can watch loads of other gameplay streams. There's loads of panels going on. There's discounts on games, and there's some great gameplay demos for games as well. So thank you to Fellow Traveller for inviting us to be part of this. You should definitely check out what's on offer, and yeah, have a great weekend exploring and finding some new games.
We forgot to mention in the previous video that there is a supporters pack available on Steam, and the supporters pack, any money spent on that goes directly to funding more LudoNarraCon events, not my yacht. And in it there's loads. Actually, I think I've seen the list, but it's crazy how much is in there. We've got, for Paris Killer, if you buy the supporters pack, you get 2 tracks from our soundtrack. You get a bunch of unique wallpapers, which I don't think are available anywhere else, and a bunch of social media avatars. So if you've got something to say, some hot take to say on a video game forum, you can rep with a Shinji avatar so people know that you mean business. And the supporters pack is full of stuff like that, full of music tracks and wallpapers and other good stuff, and supports LudoNarraCon.
Yeah, and that is really important because, you know, we know how hard it is to get a game noticed in today's world. LudoNarraCon, we were part of it last year when we had a demo of Paradise Killer, and it does a lot for you. It really does help. So, you know, supporting it means that hopefully people will get to discover more games, and the people who make those games will hopefully be able to get to make more of them. Yes. So, you know, definitely buy that, and yeah, check out some of the games on offer.
Cool. We'll see you on the next video.
Excellent.
Ta-ta.
Bye.